Yeah, that's password one.
Morena koutou, good morning everyone. Welcome to this morning's Kaihu District Council briefing. Sorry we're a few minutes late. We're just coming at you from a new and different venue for Kaihu District Council today. And we are in Mangawhai on a lovely morning on Wednesday, the 3rd of August, 22. For today's Kaihu District Council briefing, we currently have present, I'll just go around the table, we have Councillor Jonathan Larson, Deputy Mayor Anna Curnow, Councillor Mark Vincent, Councillor Peter Wethy, and Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins, and myself as Mayor Jason Smith. We just have Councillor Deliverables Woodcock is just walking in the door now, and Councillor Joyce Paki is an apology, and Councillor David Wills is joining us online. So he's watching he's watching the council meeting online. So good morning, Councillor Wills as well. So that just gives you a frame for the elected members who are here today. Now, for our agenda for today, we have 4 items which are for the public, and these include a presentation on the Three Waters Reform update, which is coming from some Department of Internal Affairs representatives who are due to be joining us through the online means through our clever internet here. And then we will be having a short break. Then there will be the Kaipara Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy discussion with Creative Northland. And there will be an item about the Kaihu Valley Trail, where at the other side of Kaihu District, where there is a new bridge being built. And so there's an item about that. And then we'll be taking another break. And then following that, there is another Three Waters Reform item. So there are 2 Three Waters Reform items on today's agenda. So the second of those items is from our in-house council staff. And that is about the funding packages which government is proposing for Kaipara District Council with the Three Waters Reform. So we'll cross that bridge as we come to it later, but in the first part of today's meeting and briefing, 2 representatives of the Department of Internal Affairs, who are 2 of the key leads for the National Transition Unit, are due to be joining us for an update from DIA. So, Councillor David Wills, morning. Thank you for joining us online. Thank you. So I'm just now going to hand over to our staff for a comment about whether the Department of Internal Affairs people are actually coming or whether they're a no-show.
Through your worship, they're definitely coming. We just have a couple of technical issues to get them online. We are hoping to have them in a couple of minutes. They're just trying their additional link now. So they're definitely here. They're definitely trying to get into the meeting. It's just a technological issue, right?
A technological issue. Thank you. All right. So they're in the ether and they're on their way to the meeting. All right. So at this point, we will still continue waiting for them. We won't be reordering the agenda for today. There is an opportunity right now for a break for a few minutes while we wait for them to join us. Thank you. So we'll take a break now, but we have, if you like, started today's briefing. But as our first and our second and our third guests, none of them is here, we need to wait. So that's what we'll do. Thank you, ka kite.
Sorry, Victoria.
Could be a very quick thing of it.
You know that.
That one turn. We'll just move straight to lunch.
Talk to me. So I've.
Don't think we're offline.
Hold you over.
Can you get past there?
Just
I know, the fire extinguisher.
fire extinguishers.
Yeah. There we go.
Are you responsible for breaking the fire alarm?
Oh, well, that'll happen. Someone's gonna bang that.
Morning, good, thank you.
Oh, looking what's right here.
It's a part. Oh, yes, exactly. When you sat down there, I thought, oh, yeah. And you're directly opposite it as well. It'll blow nicely on your.
Yeah. How are you? Good.
Kia ora.
Hi, Marlon. Welcome to the meeting. We'll be with you shortly. We're just in an adjournment.
Sure.
Right, kia ora. So we're just going to officially open this morning's Kaihu District Council briefing at this point with a karakia. Kia hora te marano kia whakapapu pounamu te moana hei ho rahi mā tātou I te rangi nei araha atu, araha mai tātou I a tātou katoa. Thank you. So for item number 1 today, our Three Waters Reform update, I believe we're being joined by Marlon Bridge from the Department of Internal Affairs, who is going to explain to us what's happening with the transition unit for the Three Waters reforms and what we might expect next. Yeah. So thank you, Marlon. Morena, good morning.
Kia ora koutou I ngā rangatira, kua hui mai nei I tēnei rā, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Marlon Bridge, taku ingoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, tēnā koutou. So thank you, it is my privilege to be here to help talk you through the Three Waters reform process and give you an update on where things are at. And apologies from Heather, who's currently on bereavement leave and couldn't be with us today. So just a little bit of background on myself. I'm currently the acting deputy chief, I'm the deputy chief executive at Watercare in Auckland. I'm on secondment to the DIA as the acting head of strategy. And for my role at the moment, I'm helping coordinate the delivery of the program for the DIA. So just a bit of background on how the program operates. There are 3 tranches to it. There is a reform side, which Hamiora Balket runs. And unfortunately, I think he's still struggling to get into the meeting, but that's okay. I'm happy to carry on without him. But the reform side looks after all the policy decisions that are being made. And at the moment, they're actively looking at the bill that's inside Parliament and going through select committee process at the moment. And internally, we're still working on the Bill 2 process, which will be released in the coming month. Now, just in terms of the other 2 tranches, we have an iwi component run by Maria Nepia, who is managing all the stakeholder relationships with iwi across the country and this new relationship around the co-governance of Three Waters program and ongoing management of the water services entities. And for me, I'm sitting inside the National Transition Unit, of which Heather Schotter is the Executive Director for that, and I'm acting in her stead at the moment. And our key areas of emphasis at the moment are standing up the program itself, getting the resources in play. We're currently working through a number of areas, and just to give you a little bit of insight into some of those parts of the program, we have currently in front of Parliament a detailed business case for the delivery of the ICT program. So the systems of record, the core systems for the water service entities to start operations on day 1. Now that picks up key systems such as the financial system, the billing system, the customer management system, and the asset management system. So those are what we're defining as core, and inside that is also payroll. And it's really important that we have as good a chance on day 1 to stand those entities up as soon as possible to give them the greatest chance of success. So just a little bit of background on what currently is happening, and I appreciate the NTU hasn't been out to Kaipara. I mean, I'm very familiar with the area, but it would have been probably better from my perspective to be sitting in the room, and maybe that opportunity will come in the coming months. But right now, in terms of the program, we have the gearing up phase. We've got a plan. The plan will be shared with everyone over the coming month. We're calling it the Day 1 Outcomes, and we're showing on a roadmap tour in late August the actual roadmap itself. So to that end, we'll be looking to come out to the regions and host that, and hopefully Dave will allow us to do that, and we can catch up in person and present the program. Now, Inside that program are a number of the key deliverables, and look, there is no rocket science in that. There is really key things that you would expect of a program of this scale, but I will highlight some of the key deliverables in the program itself and where we're heading to. Obviously, people are a really important aspects. This whole thing will not work without people being part of the process and being satisfactorily and completely put through into the new water services entities with high levels of enthusiasm and satisfaction out of that process. So at the moment, you would have seen the staff transition guidelines have been issued. The objective of that is to give everyone comfort that the process we're undertaking is open and transparent and meets the needs of all concerned. So that's out for consultation at the moment, and we're expecting that document to be finalised in October of this year. The ultimate goal in that is by March 2023, every employee that is transitioning through to the water service entities will have a clear pathway or line of sight to their options available and the training available to get them to day one successfully. So that's a really key milestone for us, in that everyone gets comfort over the role they will have in the new enduring water service entities. Outside of that, we've got the asset management plans that have been pulled together, and we're working in conjunction actually with the Northern Waters, as they're called, local transition team, and they are currently working through a number of aspects for us. One is the AMP framework itself and what that could look like for entities B, C and D. The other area is the AMP prioritisation process. So they've been working together over the last few months to figure that out so that we can use it as a framework for the other entities and have some level of national consistency across the way assets are set up for the future of these entities. So just as a minimum, to set the scene of what these new asset management plans will look like, they will reflect everything in your current asset management plan as it is today. Now, the opportunity there is, once these are all consolidated, is to try and figure out how we can optimise and introduce more for less through that program, as well as bringing in some of the frameworks that you would expect of any program of this scale to deliver. And I'm talking about just simple frameworks that we aren't reinventing the wheel on. Climate change is a good example. Energy neutrality is another good example. And iwi considerations around sustainability and all the other things that matter, right? Zero harm frameworks. These are things that, you know, we want to make sure are a core part of this. They will set the tone. They won't deliver exactly every aspect for every project, but that's not our job. Our job is to make sure that there's some national consistency across all the AMPs that are delivered for the four water service entities. But the good news is that Entity A, and unfortunately I haven't got any other name for it at this stage, is more well advanced than any of the other entities in terms of what that future asset management profile could look like for that region, so for Entity A. Other key areas operationally, we're starting to look at how the key emergency frameworks could work going forward. So we've been working with Taumata Arawai and the National Emergency Management Agency, so NEMA, in how we can provide that resilience on day one that's beyond where we are today. So there's a real concern around making sure that everyone is comfortable with the approach taken around risk management on day one, should an event occur that we need to be prepared for. So there's a little bit of focus on that at the moment. Financially, we're looking at debt profiles of councils, we're looking at assets and making sure that we can provide some advice on debt that gives everyone comfort around the numbers and how that debt will be taken over at day one and what that transaction will look like. So right now we're working on those transfer principles, but again, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take anything in terms of feedback from this process. Key aspects, again, and I will go back to people probably and talk about the training. So one of the things we're keen to make sure of, and I mentioned it through the March 23 outcome, is that there is this training pathway, because as a result of the new entity, there are going to be created a number of specialist roles. So employees coming to the water service entity will have the option to take potentially a managerial route or a technical route. And from that, they'll have some choices around key roles that they'll be able to apply for. Even though they're guaranteed a job and a role, I think the opportunities will present themselves through the process. So we're focusing on that at the moment. What else can I talk to you about? Obviously, the appointment of the CEs for this process has started. The advertisements are out. They close on the 12th of August. And through that process, we'll also see the appointment of the initial establishment boards. And hopefully at that point, you'll have some lever of governance through that process to see the transition phase through to day one. And at that point, we'll have some regional representatives groups available. Although I see from an iwi perspective, they have made aware they are ready for particularly NDA in terms of their portion of the regional representation group. Still working through the regional process of representation and what that means. So I know a lot of people are interested in that, and that's a key critical part for us. Just as in the procurement space, we're really looking to ensure that localism is a key aspect of what is delivered to each of the regions and entities. You know, we're cognizant of the fact that when big usually means less suppliers, well, that's not the case. We're specifically focusing on making sure regions grow and the contractors that are currently being used, the suppliers that are currently being used, we in fact enhance their capability to do more. And from our perspective,
Tom, can I ask a question?
yes, sure. Any time through this, please.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Councillor Deliverables Woodcock. I mean, I'm sure there are questions already so far, Marlon, but
Yes.
Councillor Deliverables Woodcock with our first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridge. Just picking up on your point that the DIA is planning to procure or put out advertisements for CEs for the proposed 4 new entities.
They're already out.
All right, I'm wondering how that aligns with proper democratic process, because the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee appointed to hear the opinions of New Zealanders through the submission process. That process has not begun, so surely it is preemptory and unlawful to procure positions and contracts for entities that have not even been instituted and therefore do not exist.
Look, all I can suggest at this point is I'll come back to you with the answer to that. But from a DIA perspective, I'm assuming at this present time that we have followed due process. But I need to confirm the exact legal or unlawful claim that's being made, that I can present to you the right facts, if that makes sense.
That would be great. Also, I'm interested in, Mr. Bridge, you introduced yourself as being seconded from Watercare, and I'm wondering, how do you manage that conflict of interest, seeing that you had a position of authority and responsibility in a council-controlled organisation of Auckland Council?
Yes.
And the people I would, reading from the huge majority of New Zealanders that are concerned about the loss of local ownership of these assets, how is it that you can reconcile your Watercare role, which you must still have connections to, and working for the direct opposite interests for the Department of Internal Affairs, which has a different agenda to that which our local government and the people, our constituents of New Zealand, have expressed?
So just on myself personally, look, I don't represent Watercare. While I'm working for the government, my viewpoint is New Zealand Incorporated, so I am taking a holistic view across New Zealand. I am probably sitting inside the DIA because I have 16 years of experience at senior level inside a large organisation that has a lot of familiarity with what's required to deliver a program like this. I was involved in a couple of amalgamations prior to this. 2006, I helped Manukau City Council create Manukau Water Limited. and that was a CCO created back in 2006. In 2010, I was one of 3 people that was involved in the establishment of water care through the Super City integration process. So I'm using those skills to help with the process itself and the delivery of it. I'm not representing any viewpoints or any political biases on this process, but while there is an expectation that there is a delivery of this required, I'm happy to use my skills in the best interest of New Zealand to deliver that outcome.
Thank you. Could you just define the term that you used, New Zealand Incorporated? I haven't heard that term.
Well, I use that personally, which is more about representing an equal share of interests across all of New Zealand, across urban and rural, provincial, and in a way that makes sure that the playing platform for day one for these 4 water service entities is as equal as it can be in representing everyone equally in this outcome of this process.
So that word New Zealand Incorporated, is that a new definition and current use by the DIA, or is that
No, this is my personal. I don't know another term. I could say in the best interests of New Zealand, that is something that I should have probably said if that makes better sense.
Thank you, Mr. Bridge.
Thank you. So Marlon, just on that point and about, sorry, Mark, go on, about your point about equity, if you like, between rural and provincial and urban people, if you like. The word equity is not currently one of the objectives in the Water Service Entities Bill for the proposed water entities. So the notion of equitable water services or equity is not there. So you've just spoken about that, and the Minister has spoken as well about the desire to have equity, if you like, and equal water. So how can we get the word equity into the statement of objectives for the water service entities? If you're the lead on it and you're saying it should be there, and the Minister has gone to the public and said that that's what it's all about, Jack, and yet it's absolutely been excluded and excluded and excluded from the short list statements of the objectives for the water services entity. How are we supposed to handle that when we hear you say that and yet it's not actually in the proposed bill? Do you have an approach to that, please?
Yes, look, I wasn't aware that it wasn't in the bill. It's a term that's been used a lot in DIA, and I have heard the Minister use it as well. Fairness we're staying away from, because what you define as fair is not fair for me. But ultimately what we're trying to do is bring some level of balance to the way the outcomes are perceived in each area, in each region, by each demographic, by each race, creed, whatever it is, in terms of equity. So the ways to bring it through, we're using it internally as a key principle inside the DIA, that we are cognizant of facts like localism, right? That for me is defined as a way of saying, how do we make sure everyone gets a fair piece of what the new entities provide? And that is an understanding at a local level what it means for each community. So the transfer principles in the way that the assets ultimately come across and the transaction that ultimately takes place as a mechanism, but ultimately on day one, I think it's the statement of service performance or statement of service expectation that comes from the stakeholders, the RRG, through to the water service entities that will ensure at a level that the water service entity needs to operate at, that these things will be operating on an equitable basis, whether that's intergenerational, again, cross region, again, cross race, sex, creed, whatever it is, that's the interests of what we're trying to deliver.
Okay, thank you. So for entity A, where we are and where Auckland is, which you well know, as you know, there's a bespoke set of arrangements for the RRG proposed for that, quite different to any other entity in the country that's taking account of Auckland's size and scale. One of the challenges that we have as Kaipara District Council with the bespoke arrangements that exist for entity A is that there are not, in the proposed water entities bill, bespoke supermajority decision rules for entity A, which align with the bespoke membership arrangement. If there were the same membership arrangements as everyone else, then Kaipara District Council wouldn't need the same bespoke, or it wouldn't need a difference. So one of the points that if you like, I'm explaining this very badly right now. So one of the key challenges here is at the 75% supermajority rule, the three councils of Northland representing Ngā Tangata Katoa o Te Taitaukarau could be absolutely excluded from having any of their wishes included in that statement of strategic intent or strategic expectations that you speak of. Because, and I can see you nodding, so I hope that you
I understand what you're saying.
Hearing what I'm saying, but this is on the simple maths of this. So for us, for Kaipara, for Whangarei, and for Far North District Council, it's very, very challenging, because if Auckland and the iwi say this is what is in the statement of strategic expectations, then that is your 75%. Full stop. And so that will be the statement of strategic expectation, and there is no requirement for the rest of the councils, the other 3/4 of the councils, to even be at the table. So we have a real concern here in the maths, and I'm saying it's in the maths, the bespoke arrangements of the RRG and the supermajority decision powers there. And so Kaipara District Council is advocating that it should be at 90%. And so what that would ensure is that at least one of the 3 councils of Northland would need to say, yes, our voice is actually in the statement of strategic expectations. In order for it to be a statement of strategic expectations, it comes back to this point we're just making about equity, coming back to this point we were just making about localism, accountability, and, you know, taking all of the people with the momentum that's here. Are you across that?
Yeah, look, I understand what you're talking about in terms of what you're trying to emphasise here. Now, legally, I think the answer is the constitution hasn't been developed for these entities. So there's still this process to go through to identify the constitution, which is basically the shareholders' agreement. So there's a vehicle there that might be able to address this. Legislation is another vehicle, agree? So we can look at that bespoke for entity A.
Marlon, but I would just say that the establishment of that constitution, the 3 councils of Northland could be excluded from the establishment of the constitution in the first place because of that very supermajority rule in the very first instance. That's the point.
Look, yep, I agree, but I don't think that's the case. So while NTU is involved in helping set those constitutions up, we'll make sure all voices are heard and clarified through that process. Now, I just wanted to give a little bit.
So in that case, could it be a 100% supermajority, an absolute consensus required then? We'd love that. That would be wonderful. If we could get a 100% consensus required for the statement of strategic expectations, then all of the voices would be being heard, which is what you've just spoken to, Marlon, hearing that. Yes. So thank you. And I tautoko that, so thank you, about yes, we want all the voices to be heard. If you go with absolute consensus, then you would have that all the time. And that would be very robust.
So look, while I might not be able to influence the 100%, I can certainly stand here as an advocate for what you're suggesting. But I also want to give a little bit of a reality around what it means from a water service entity perspective. And I'll cast myself back to 2010 when I was sitting in front of Franklin District Council and Rodney District Council, who had the same concerns about what amalgamation meant for their smaller councils at the time when they were amalgamating 6. So what happened was, the reality is for the water service entities, the biggest concern they have on day one is making sure that water compliance is met in all of their areas that they're servicing. And what we typically found in the likes of Rodney and Franklin is there were lots of levels of non-compliance. Auckland City Council had a full compliance, and the first initial investment that was made into the new water service entity called Watercare back then, and called NDDA or whatever its name is in the future, their focus will be on non-compliance. So I would expect a significant investment in the far north, potentially in Kaipara if you've got many non-compliant plants, to be addressing those issues, which means there will be substantial investment within the first decade of these entities being set up to ensure full compliance. Then what happens typically after that is levels of service get addressed. So as standards improve, everyone gets shifted in their levels of service. And then there's a key issue around the plans, and these entities follow the plans of councils. So whatever your plan is, as do other utilities, electricity, power, water will be no different. They will follow the plans of councils and the delivery requirements to meet growth. So from a more realistic point of view, and I acknowledge the concerns around shareholding and having a say and making sure that it's a unified voice. I completely agree. I just can't influence that. I can be an advocate for it, but ultimately I think there are mechanisms that will ensure that Kaipara will be a benefactor of what's coming with the water reforms.
Thank you. Councillor Deliverables, we've got a further question. We've just got 5 minutes left. Councillor Curnow has a question as well.
So my first question is the public law firm Queen's Counsel Gary Judd has released a legal opinion that says that the proposed water services entities bill and its statements that regard to ownership by communities, by councils, is actually calculated to deceive parliamentarians and the New Zealand public generally, because it has no, it is a redefinition of ownership without the attributes of ownership which are denied, which are control and benefits that are derived. So how is it, can you tell me how the DIA is going to respond to this legal challenge of this as being an unlawful proposition for our country?
Look, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure the DIA will answer to that, but I just can't sit here and, all I know is that the assets continue to be owned 100% by the councils that bring them in. So what you're talking about is another aspect of ownership, which is the control piece. Well, in order to achieve that, there is still some level of control, but there just happens to be some shared co-governance through a new relationship with iwi. So I'm not qualified to provide any legal advice. I'll acknowledge what you've said, and if I can come back to you on that, I certainly will.
And my final question is, our Kaipara District Council has met New Zealand drinking water safety standards. It is compliant for our reticulated potable water supply. We do have non-compliant wastewater treatment plants. And why is it that the Department of Internal Affairs is not directing some of the ICT budget that has been tabled at $500 million towards sorting out our ageing Three Waters infrastructure and leaving us to do the job of local government and localism that you have talked to?
Look, I can't answer that question. All I can say is the ICT requirements to establish the new water service entities will then allow them to operate more efficiently, deliver what's required to meet those compliance standards from day one. And you know, I can't answer the other politics of it, unfortunately.
All right, thank you, Marlon. And just a quick statement here about the ownership issue. Kaipara District Council goes from 100% ownership of its water assets to 1% of the ownership of the scale of entity A. So it's certain, and that is what's prescribed in the Water Entities Bill. So, Councillor Curnow.
Thank you, Marlon. I have some questions that are less about whether we like Three Waters or not, and more about the process and how we get there. And I'm particularly interested in the transition arrangements around handing over the valuation of the debt, the uncertainties around guarantees and securities, the handling of derivatives, and like depreciation balances. Now, I know that LGFA, who are the majority lender to the whole of government, are at this point a little concerned about the time frame. I understand that DIA is intending to have clarity on this in March 23, but LGFA's sense is, given the sort of the credit ratings impacts that the uncertainty could have, that's possibly a little too far out. Can you comment on that? And I think, you know, it is quite a serious issue that is accelerated, because this is a highly complex transaction. And there doesn't seem to be a great deal of understanding at this point as to how that's going to work.
Yep, that's okay. I can answer that. And just up front, we're happy to work with Kaipara District Council to provide certainty over that debt at any time. So we could do that next week if you think that was really important. So just to give you a bit of flavour for what that is, all water and wastewater, stormwater debt will transfer through to the new entity. Now, there'll be some assessment, because generally, and I don't know the circumstances of Kaipara, but there is a group debt, and typically councils haven't allocated it to water. So there'll be an assessment made. We'll work together to achieve that. Where you have identified it, we'll just be confirming it, and that debt then transfers over. How it transfers over is really specific to a council. So if you believe it's best to get cash as a result of that, we'll give you cash. If you think it's best to take the existing debt and the associated derivatives with it, we'll take that as well. So there is no hard and fast rule. It's a matter of working with councils, firstly to identify, and then secondly to work through how that transfer will occur. So we have been working with Mark Butcher. He is a potential lens for us to help transfer this debt. He's obviously very familiar with the workings of local government, being a big supplier of debt through them. So we are actively working with him. I've personally met with Mark 3 times in the last 6 months to start working through how we could get this to occur. And the March deadline is more about providing some more certainty around the principles so that we're more consistent overall, because each council, as I've been working through this, and I've had dozens of conversations on debt, have been different and unique. And it's pretty hard to give a generic response without looking specifically at the details of what you consider debt and how we can work through to transfer that to the new entity.
What about things like sort of guarantees and security post-transition? How do you envisage that working?
So I already know that Kaipara has been working through with Northern Waters to identify all the property elements associated with Three Waters and tidying up some of that in the background. But that also includes some of the guarantees that are required, some of the access rights that are required, and all those things are just part of a package around what needs to then be figured out as to how is best to transfer, or if you feel it's best to stay, then stay with council. There's no hard and fast rule, but there are some key criteria that we've got that we can easily talk through with the officers at Kaipara.
And security, how do you, against the entity's debt? So obviously the entities will have a huge amount of debt. Where's the security going to sit with that? And how does that impact on LGFA?
Yeah, great question. So the water service entities are going through a process now with Standard & Poor's to identify whether they are substantial enough to support their own debt structures and debt profiles. And assuming on day one, because it hasn't been finalised yet, that the water service entity is able to borrow in its own right, they will take security over all the debts that have been allocated in relation to Kaipara's water and wastewater debt.
Yeah, I think
Thank you. Councillor Larson, please.
Move on to the camera.
Or just,
Maybe you can see me. Hi, Marlon. I'm just
That's all right.
edge of the room.
Kia ora.
Just sort of going back to a little bit of the history that we've observed. You know, when we first started out on this process, we were opting in and out, and there was quite a lot of sort of council opposition. And next thing, we were mandated with the proposal. My sense of the buy-in from councils and from the constituents in our area and generally the public across the whole country is that people are very, very anti the Three Waters proposals and particularly the proposed governance structure. And it's difficult for us because we're sort of caught in the middle in that we're having it imposed on us without being able to be democratic about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
How is DIA or central government going to manage, taxpayer buy-in into this? There's so much opposition to it. And how are you actually going to take the people along on the journey with you?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. I mean, I'm not a communications expert. I just know what good looks like, and I know how to deliver things in a way that people will see value in the long term. So while I am comfortably sitting in the background helping crystallise some of the deliverables that are expected out of the Three Waters program, what we need to do, and like I said, the fault falls on me a little bit as well as others in the team, is start providing some better communication around what that means, because the narrative is being driven outside of Three Waters rather than by the program itself. So look, I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be fixed tomorrow because I don't have that skill set, but I'm assuming others in the wider Three Waters program will be addressing that in the coming months. And to that extent, the first step on that is later this week or early next week, you'll see the release of the new Three Waters website. It's been currently sitting inside the DIA website, and it's been lost, and it's been very difficult to find relevant information and facts about what can be expected out of the Three Waters reform process. So again, just a little step, but those little steps are really important as we become more open and transparent about what we're trying to do here. So like I said, over the next month or so, we'll be coming out with the roadmap and the day one outcomes. That will then be made public, and all information that we start producing over the next period will be made available to others to view and track progress, and not only progress, but see some of the value that's being extracted through this process.
Okay, thanks, Marlon. Yeah, I appreciate that there are steps being taken. I guess just, I'm sure you're aware of it, but just sort of by way of feedback, I think there's quite a long way to go to bring it back to the middle position, because there's a really huge amount of social unrest out there around this. People really hate being dictated to and having things mandated on them without proper consultation where they're actually listened to, and that's kind of where we've got to at the moment. So it's a bit of backpedaling to do to get to a position where people might have some level of buy-in. Anyway, that's just my little bit of...
Yeah, look, hopefully I can give you some comfort through the delivery process that we're not looking to drive this completely controlled process all the way down, that you'll see the regions start to take ownership of the models as they evolve. The NTU is really about making sure that some of the key fundamentals of what you would expect to see are there. A climate change perspective should be across New Zealand as we move these entities forward, just as some semblance of what are we targeting from a national perspective on key aspects of procurement. You know, we should be thinking about that. We should be thinking about innovation, things that haven't been thought about collectively across New Zealand before. So again, energy neutrality should be drivers for what this performance is. There will be no dictation as to what that looks like, but there is an expectation that needs to be set that the regions, once they're established, need to start being consistent in the way they manage that across New Zealand.
Thanks, Marlon. Yeah, I just think that if the people don't have any democratic say in any of this, you're not going to have them on board. But thank you very much for your time.
Right.
Thank you, Marlon. Question from me here is you've mentioned about the program tour that will be coming as part of the information to come to the community, and that DIA is going to be coming around to talk to the councils and to talk to the people about what they can expect. You mentioned about their program tour.
Yeah, it's just the CEOs, can I just be clear at this point? It's the chief
be.
executives at this point and the key personnel that the chief execs want to see that process before it then becomes a wider, more available to others, the public in general.
Yeah, sorry. So you mentioned earlier in your presentation there would be a program tour to come and bring it to the people to explain.
Yeah.
Now, we've never had that. Kaipara District Council back in September of last year wrote an official letter to the minister inviting the minister and DIA to do exactly that, to come to the people and to explain. So look, so I'm absolutely delighted that our request from September 30th last year has been listened to. That's great. So my simple question is in what possible month or time frame would you be considering that may be taking place?
So can I just clarify, do you want us to speak to ratepayers, or do you want us to speak to the council, councillors, officers, or all?
So the important thing here is that we have transparency and that all of the people can hear and can get confidence through the council about what's happening here. I'm not, based on what Councillor Larson said, I would say town hall meetings with 300 angry people is the purview of the general election campaign for next year, where the minister should be fronting the people, not the operative professionals of the vision of, and of the entities. So I would say, but through our council processes, the entire community is able to watch through the elected representatives. They're able to feed in questions in advance as part of that program tour. But I'm just like saying, it's not just about the officers talking with our council staff, because through the elected representatives, while we have elected representatives who can talk about Three Waters, there's an important opportunity there for transparency. So my question is just when on a calendar might that be?
Look, I've been to the far north twice, and I'm happy to come to Kaipara whenever you need me there. So if you said tomorrow, I'll be there tomorrow. So look, from my perspective, I'm really privileged that you've reached out, and I apologise for a letter that came in September that we didn't come back to you, because I've been travelling all over the place to make sure that everyone hears the messages at councillor, mayor and officer level and staff level. So look, I have to apologise, because I'm happy to do that in any time frame that suits your council, and share thoughts around where things are at, where things are going, concerns you may have, involvement in the process. So I'm more than willing to provide a timetable, or have you provide some thoughts to me as to when I can turn up.
Look, thank you, Marlon. Thank you very much for that offer. That is very much appreciated. I think that's a really good note for us to end this presentation on, because we're already over time for this presentation. Councillor Wills, I can see you've got your hand up. Is this a short question?
All my questions are short, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Hi, this is an operational question. I'm not going to focus on the co-governance or the loss of local control. I'm more interested in the operational aspects. There were a number of financial forecasts presented to us at the very start of this process to justify it. But we challenged the accuracy of the basis of some of those numbers. And I'm asking now, from an operational perspective, after further assessment, are those numbers still confirmed as being accurate, the benefits of this process?
Look, the principle in how the price movement is, look, can I confirm the exact numbers? confirm the exact numbers, but I can tell you that there is an expectation that Kaipara in its price movements, you would expect to see values similar to what all customers across the region will have. So what is the price that I would say is happening right now? And I'll talk about Mangawhai if I can. I would expect to see decreases as a result of an Entity A integration.
We don't.
And that I would expect to see across the region, but I'm just not as familiar with all the pricing I've seen.
So following on from
provide
that,
those numbers with detail at our next conversation.
So following on from that, because Watercare has been held up as an example of success of the benefit of scale. Having property down there, the complexity of the billing, the monthly billing process, compared to what we operate up here, hasn't been explained to the community. The actual level of detail and the frequency of the payments required by Watercare also hasn't been explained to our community. Moving on from that, is there an intention for there to be a complete commonality of costs right across Entity A? Will it be any cost subsidization? Will be any targeted rates like we currently have to justify local infrastructure?
Look, in terms of the question around frequency of payments, that'll be up to the Chief Executive to work with your council to determine. They can stay as they are now, but I can explain the rationale for Watercare in terms of why it went to monthly. It was seen as an easier way to chunk down the cost into smaller bite pieces so people could afford to pay rather than having an annual charge or a quarterly charge. So that was the only justification. It brought cash flow benefits, and I know this, to the tune of 26 million on day one. But, from a overall management across Entity A, that's really an Entity A conversation at a later date. And hopefully that's in a few months when you've got a chief executive who can answer that for you. But there is no definite thinking around consistency. There is definite thinking around the pricing and the level of pricing. And at the moment, that thinking is around holding pricing or decreasing pricing. There's no one talking about increasing pricing. So
there's no suggestion that it be common across the whole entity?
No, not at this stage.
Because there's areas of issues, for example, with Auckland's wastewater costs coming. Do we end up carrying the load for that at the Kaipara end?
Yes.
What I know of scale is I would expect Kaipara to be a benefactor of the outcome of this process. So I'm happy to walk through the specific numbers at the next time I come and see you, which may be shortly, or talk you through the specifics of it.
I apologise, but I'm being put on time frame. It would have been appreciated to have had some information before this meeting and the presentation, so we knew where to direct our questions. Having
that's fine.
Where you were going to lead this subject meant I couldn't prepare the questions I would have liked to have asked.
Look, and I apologise because I was brought in late to the equation, not knowing what context to deliver a conversation about. So I'll come more prepared next time, and I'll make sure those questions are addressed. I'll give you the opportunity to ask whatever questions you want, and I'll come prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, Marlon, for that offer. That is very, very important and significant for Kaipara District Council. I think it's interesting you've been to the far north twice, and so you've been over Kaipara.
Yes.
Which is part of our story, and of course, Kaipara people only 54% are on reticulated wastewater, and only 25% are on reticulated drinking water. So you talk about the council, there's one thing, but we talk about ngā tangata katoa, we talk about the people, is who we as the elected representatives represent, most of whom are not connected to any of the services. So it's a particularly interesting piece of the map right beside Auckland, which is easy to overlook. So I'm delighted about your offer. Thank you, to return to the council. And I would say to the governance team and the chief executive that it would be wonderful if there could be a dedicated briefing session of a few hours to go through the various aspects so that there's clarity for the people regarding the financing and the debt, and regarding the transfer and what that looks like. And more detailed opportunities in advance for the elected members to provide feedback and questions in advance, and for them to socialise that with the community, so that the people are getting the very best answers that are kaipara answers for kaipara people, because frankly, the rest of everyone else is somewhere else. And we are focused on our kaipara people. So Marlon, thank you for today. We're going to close your presentation at this point, but thank you for joining us, and that's very much appreciated. I wish you a very good day wherever you are, and thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Ka kite.
Kia ora, ka kite.
At this point, we are scheduled 20 minutes ago to adjourn for a break for 5 minutes. So we're going to do that at this point. So we're just going to have a 5-minute break. Thank you. And then we will be proceeding with the Kaipara Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy item. Thank you.
Taking us offline.
Sorry?
Someone's taking us offline.
Kia ora, welcome back. And for our next item, we have Hinu Rawa joining us to present from Creative Northland the first ever Kaipara District Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy. So nā mai haere mai. E koa. Welcome to Kaipara District Council and thank you for bringing this extraordinary piece of work. We're looking forward to your presentation. Morena.
Ngā mihi.
Kia ora. Just before we get started, Hinu and I are here today to present the draft Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy, as your worship has just said. The purpose of today is for you as elected members to be able to provide some feedback to Hinuera, and we will take away the recommendations and look at amending any of the draft strategy, bringing it back to council in September, hopefully to be adopted. There are some implications around future funding. That is an area that will be addressed with the incoming council. That'll be done through the annual plan and LTP processes as well. I'd like to, as the Mayor just said, introduce Hinuera Tahau, who is the General Manager of Creative Northland. And we also have online, although you can't see her at the moment, hopefully she's online, is Olivia Garalja, who is our Creative Northland Kaipara advisor. So has been pivotal in this whole process of the strategy. So I'll hand it over to Hinu to be able to present the PowerPoint and then we'll open it for discussion.
Ina mana ina reo, ina tuputu e whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Tēnā koe, ma Jason, ai rangatira, e te mana whenua, tēnā koutou. E te kaunihira o Kaipara Te Ora Nui, e te Jason, Jenny, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Yes, I'm Hinuera Tahau and the General Manager for the Creative Northland, and this will be my last, journey in the General Manager role for Creative Northland, and so I'm really delighted to be here today to get this, to present this and to get to the stage where it's adopted with you. Don't worry, I'm not going very far, but Olivia, who's not online as yet, is stepping into the role of General Manager Capability, and I step into a new role, the still oversight of Creative Northland, but into the vocational learning space, because the creative economy needs to stay on the agenda in that educational space for us. Anyway, without further ado. So, to give you some context, how did we develop this strategy? Well, KDC was very fortunate to receive a grant of $29,000 for Creative New Zealand. Creative New Zealand, through COVID, identified that it was really important for local government to be able to look at arts, culture and heritage in a positive way. And so they gave some money out, and in partnership with Jason Maris and his team and Jenny, we put that application in and you were successful. And being successful means we were contracted to develop the strategy, take it out for public consultation. And we did that last year between August and November, February to March, but unfortunately being on COVID, we couldn't do our regular face-to-face, so we had to take it online. And we had a total of about 8 online workshops, 2 face-to-face, which some of you councillors did attend, so thank you so much. And Jason, to you, Dr. Smith, thank you so much for coming along to the Kaiwaka one. We established a stakeholder reference group, which was made up of around about 10 to 14 people. That was to keep us honest, to make sure that we were on track and whatever we were gathering made sense to our creative practitioners. We also, too, because of COVID, had to think of other ways and means to gather the data. So we did a series of surveys out to those from age 14 to 45. We recognised we're missing the youth voice. You'd be pleased to know that between Far North and yourselves, you had the highest number of youth who responded to our survey. 27, doesn't sound an awful lot, but for the youth, 27 responses to a survey was really damn good. We did a series of one-on-one interviews. We did about 5 interviews with key arts people who've got a long history within this within the arts space within Kaipara. And with that, in total participation in COVID climate, 135. Now we were hoping for up to 200, responses for a sample, because that's a good sample, but we can't sneeze at 135 either. And we're hoping, so the next stage would be, we've had council feedback, council officer feedback, we'll get feedback from you, Hopefully we'll have time to take it back up for consultation. That may get our sample up again. And if we sit at about 180, we'll be very happy with the strategy outputs. So one of the key things that came out of the consultation was that we've got a Kaipara creative ecology. And the great thing about this ecology is it identified 7 key things. And about those things, and they're the key core outcomes of the creative ecology, is that it shows you what a network of relationships may be with other sectors. It leads a movement of change makers, because we're at that stage where the creative voice is about affecting change in a number of ways. How does it affect climate change, environmental issues, three waters? So that puts it in a nice, neat way to articulate what the arts community looks like. It also shows how we can have better collaboration across sectors. It means that the creative economy is not isolated. It means that it fits the cultural, the well-beings really, really well. And also gives an understanding of what the investment opportunities may be outside of the creative sector. So therefore, we're not relying on the Ministry of Culture and Heritage or Creative New Zealand, but there are other agencies that we can go to. The other thing too, to make sure that this strategy is fit for purpose, then we've got to look at what the strategic fit. Do you mind if I stand? I'm just find it very challenging to sit in a presentation. The other thing is looking at the strategic fit. And so this is looking at all the different plans that Kaipu District Council have created in this space of arts, culture and heritage, and looking at how the alignment may be with your annual plan, with your long-term plan, and is there a strategic fit? And you'll be pleased to know there is. The strategic fit comes down to growing a better Kaipara, that 2 out of the 6 community, apologies, there's a bit of a typo there, but your strategic outcome focuses on celebrating diversity, but the 2 out of the 6 community outcomes supports the strategy is around prosperous economy and vibrant communities. So there's a real good strategic fit in delivery and implementation of this arts and culture strategy. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. So what's the vision? This is the vision. And as you can see, there's a good alignment with their vision to the annual plan. So Kaipu District is an attractive place to live and create. That's really come through solidly from the creative community, where our local heritage, culture and creativity is valued and reflected in our communities. There was a real strong sense of place, sense of belonging that really came through, how much local heritage needs to be celebrated. And as you'll see within the action plan, is that we have a Ngātoi Māori goal objective, which came through loud and clear in this ideation, which is really fantastic. Now, what is the path for the next 10 years? Well, as we've got the vision that is there. So vision, what do we want to see in the 10 years? As you can see, 2 of your community outcomes fits our vision that we have there around local heritage and culture being valued, around vibrant communities. Kaipara communities offer an attractive place to live and visit. Oh my goodness, hasn't Mangawhai changed from the place that you used to be? Our goals, we have 6 goals that are there to be implemented. The difference you want to make, you want our work to make. So I won't go through all of them, but Toi Māori is sitting at number 1 goal there, which how do we encourage and support Ngātoi Māori? It's about cultural infrastructure. What does existing cultural infrastructure look like? What may be the new infrastructure that could be created? Are there any need for new cultural and heritage centres outside of museums? More opportunities to share rich heritage and creativity of Kaipara. The Kaipara story is not well known. However, Matakohi Museum is very much on the cultural tourism pathway, but what else than Kaipara?
You would say that, yes.
I know, I'm biased, what can I say? However, it's probably about being one of our most recognised, as well as Otamatia Repertoire Society. So, how do we teach skills in the creative community? This is about what the program delivery looks across regionally. How do we develop audiences? How do we bring more events alive? And Kaipara does have a history of events, but the longevity not necessarily there. And how do we engage youth and create pathways? And your schools all have arts programs, you know, Deliverables, on all the schools now, Dartmouth School, Rural Wide College, they all have an arts program that is happening there. And they all part of creative schools with education. So, you know, that whole STEM thing is very important. The values are very much values which are aspirational, but they also guide the work. Dreaming. It's a good one, isn't it? How often do we dream? To flourish, thriving, open to opportunities, connected, vibrant and challenging. Within the strategy, we have an action plan, and the action plan is to ensure that the strategic outcomes can be delivered and we can get some runs on the board. The action plan it identifies, as I said, 6 goals, 12 objectives, which provides a framework for the next 10 years. The immediate focus of the strategy, though, is on the first 3 years, what can be achieved now towards 2025, and investment in resources is required. But, you know, but that will be up to perhaps the next council to determine what that looks like. And we have prepared an investment paper, investment implications paper for Jason Maris. And anyway, during the 10 years, is that we've given you a framework as to what that delivery may look like. So there needs to be regular reporting. You don't have any cultural policy. It's an opportunity for you to develop cultural policy for council. It's an opportunity to revisit the strategy at regular intervals. Is the strategy still fit for purpose? Do those key community outcomes or strategic outcomes, do they still fit the community and where their thinking is? The tentative timeframes outline steps to review, because at some point halfway mark for the action plan, you will need to review it to determine what the next 3 years may be. Bearing in mind that year 1, year 2 and year 3 of the action plan, dependent on level of priority for you, is that some of those actions may carry across into 4 and 5 year. Hence the reason the halfway mark at 6 years is really important, or 5-year mark, to review the strategy to see what the next ideation looks like. And of course, the very important part is ensuring that the outcomes of the strategy are including in your annual plan and long-term plan. That's the only thing that we all desire, is to make sure that we're there for longevity. And finally, this is just about the investment applications. Jason Maris asked me the question about what the investment might look like. And of course, you've got to go through those. Well, so this is just ballpark figures based upon what we know. I mean, it's not saying that you have to be tied into this at all. It's to give some level of ideation on what it looks like. Because there's so many implications, isn't there, when you develop a strategy, and then how do you implement it, and then who has responsibility for it. As you will see in the strategy, there is a responsibility for the strategy. Creative Northland, irrespective of investment, will continue to deliver on the strategy, because we need to. We do receive funding from Foundation North to be able to do what we do now, which pays for our creative advisor to work here in this community, which is 2 days per month. And so we're looking to increase that to 1 day a week, which would be fantastic. So as you can see, there's a bit of an ask there, but we know that may go into the next annual plan, but we just want to put that on the radar, because I think that's important. And also to what extra funding could we expect from KDC. And it's looking like that over the next 3 to 5 years, that investment could look around about 185,000. But that's based on goals, and that's looking at things like, if you develop a communication strategy, who does that? If you develop a Ngātua Māori strategy, and Creative Northland does that, then there's the levels of investment that come from council to us. If we're looking at a cultural mapping exercise, is that something that council could do with your own geodesic cultural mapping, or is that something that needs to be, farmed out? So there's, those objectives. Anyway, that's it. I may have overstepped my 5 minutes. But anyway, kia ora. Thank you. Questions.
Kia ora, Hinu. Thank you very much for your presentation and for bringing this extraordinary piece of work to us. We've got some questions around the table. Councillor Weddy, Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was a great strategy that you've developed here, and I was certainly very interested in reading it through. But I'll just take you back to the briefing paper that you wrote to and sent to Jason Maris back in the 2nd of July. And on the second point there, it says Cultural Northland aims to expand the creative economy, which is currently approximately $11 million to the Kaipara district, 5, representing 12% of the Northland economy, worth $92 million in 2018 and growing. couple of questions. Firstly, I'm not sure the relevance of 2025 in that statement.
Probably a spelling mistake.
And secondly, where did you, or how did you assess the current worth of $11 million? And I presume that the Northland economy, you're talking about the creative economy, not the total economy, I hope.
So we used to be funded, we used to see funding from Northland Regional Council. And one of the objectives with Northland Regional Council when we received that funding up until 2018 was that they used to do a valuing the creative economy report for us. And so that was done by Dale Jones, who's their economist there, and we would look at the value of the creative economy. So in 2018, the report that was based on 2017 figures, and through COVID, we have done some preliminary figures as well, is that we know that in 2018 that the economy was worth to Kaihu, to Northland in general, 92 million. Then if we look at where that 92 million in total, which is contributing about 1.1% to the GDP for Northland. But if we then had to do the breakdown as to where, say, the jobs are for the creative economy, where's the greatest growth for the economy, it showed that 58% of the creative economy is generated within whangarei, 33% in the far north, and 12% within this community here. Yeah. And so, you know, you just go for Kaipara, it's all about growth. And so that's how we can determine how, when we work within the community, what our level of investment into the community is by resourcing time-wise, and then how do we ensure that you stay on the creative narrative. Oh, sorry. Oh, kia ora. Thanks, Anna. So that's how it's there. So we are going to be looking to update that. So just to fast forward, during 2020, we did some preliminary figures because the events across the region within the first 3 weeks of COVID hitting us, we know that we lost, the number of events that we lost was high, which was worth about 4.3 million to the Northland economy. And so, you know, when you sort of look at that and look where the breakdown is for the Kaipara in that area, it's your community events. So many of your community events were, and we know that the of that 4.3 million, it was sitting around about 8%, 9% for the Kaipara district. So yeah. So doing those sort of metrics for us is really important, though we always need more research to sort of validate our footprint. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a number of queries, comments relating to the document itself, but first I have a process question.
Sorry, and if I could just come in there. So there's an opportunity, there is a request here from Creative Northland for feedback from the elected members. So today isn't necessarily the day for that feedback. I'd say please provide that in writing as urgently as possible so that feedback can be incorporated into the document that's going to go out for the consultation with the community. Rooney, is that right?
We are seeking some feedback today, some discussion if there's time, definitely.
So if people have like infelicities or spelling mistakes or suggested extra bits, so there is an added opportunity to provide that.
Yeah.
Cool. Just in terms of the process, this is a policy document. We're in the election silly season, and the intention is to adopt this within the term of the current council, but there are financial implications for the next council. And I wonder if the timing might be better to leave it for the new council to actually formally adopt. That's my question.
Really, Your Worship, if I can. So the strategy is the strategy. And I'm very comfortable with this council adopting the strategy. The point that Jenny made at the introduction is there are possibilities for funding. Now, that is for future annual plan and LTP discussions. You'll note in the documents it talks about possibly 20,000 for the next annual plan. So we will go through that with the incoming council And the timing is important. We'd like to get the strategy done, so then it informs the LTP. We've not had a strategy before, and therefore each council struggled to invest money in this sector because of that. So it's really key to get it adopted now, but the financial decisions are going to be made by the incoming council as part of the annual plan and the future LTP cycle. So it separates now.
But we're not going to be causing a
No.
concern as far as that, because that was something that troubled me a little regarding it. But yeah, I can leave the rest of my comments, but
All right, thank you. We'll go to Councillor Wills, who has his hand up. Thank you, on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, before I speak, hey, I'm really supportive of the intention of this and bringing this into a more formal process. But my first question is, what is the strategy? I've read the document in its total, but it's a wordy, long document, and credit to the authors. But what is the strategy? And
so, if I could perhaps ask you back a question then, what of the strategy and what you read, what doesn't it meet for you?
Okay, it's for a start, a simplification. Like you've got the vision is worded very simply and easily understood, and it's aspirational. It's great, and it's, as I said, I'll explain. But the strategy is you refer to it all the way through the document in the third party, but through to be achieved, to reach the vision and to be achieved through these action plan. But you don't. I guess you don't have the strategy in a simple, when you're going to the public to present this, you don't have it in a simple format that's easily understood. You have to draw the strands out of the whole document. I'm just providing that feedback that the strategy, if you could condense it down to a couple of sentences, what you're looking to achieve with this.
So, Councillor Wills, are you asking for if you like, a one-page version of an executive summary of the strategy to also be prepared in addition to the detailed document?
No, it's something that the whole way through it refers to the strategy in the third person. The strategy itself can be defined as they've defined the vision in a way that's easily explainable and expressed. That's what I'm just providing very brief feedback here, because I know the meeting, we've got to keep going. So that was my first point, was just if you can.
Councillor Wills, I can answer that question for you. Answer that question for you. So with a strategy document, you're right, this is a very wordy document, but this is your first strategy that you ever have. And sometimes with organisations like us, we have to cover all bases, and that's exactly what we've done. Also too, there's never been a cultural landscape done on this community around what creativity looks like, nor has there been one done around Ngātoi Māori either. But I'm going to talk with you, what is the strategy? If you're looking to do, we do a summary document, and we can create a summary document for the strategy, which would be a 4-page A4 sort of thing, that we have done. But also too, that we would go immediately to pages 16 and 17 of this document, which actually highlights what the vision is and what's the path for the next 10 years. That is your strategy in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I mean, because once you get into that, then you can also with your next layer of detail add measurable outcomes, for example, and things like that you layer on afterwards. So I just wanted to bring it up that, like I said, I'm really supportive of what you're trying to achieve here, and I'm just trying to provide positive feedback in how next layer, when it's presented to the public, if you can provide that strategic, narrow it down into a easier format that is more concise and more easily appreciated and understood. The other thing is that in a strategy, this one is, and I fully take on board what you're saying about it's the very first one that this COPE was done, but it's largely internally focused. Whereas, for example, the tourism, the opportunity there is that they're looking to feed off the benefit of being part of the Northland community. So is there potential for the arts and to feed off the strengths of the other districts around us, and some of the activities? Because that was the only two comments I had, is it's very internally focused into what is important to us in the Kaipara, but there's potential for the strategy to also acknowledge and encompass those things outside that could be to our benefit. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wills. Can I respond? Dr. Smith? Those are very pertinent comments, and thank you very much, Councillor Wills, for that particular feedback. Yes, the feedback is very much what the community has said. Hopefully there is an external focus, and if you look at your triggers and partners, that's where we need to ensure that, we put Tourism New Zealand in there as a partner. we will review the goals from yourselves and from the community when it goes back for public consultation, to make sure that tourism is included, that cycleways are included, because they're all part of the remit. However, they haven't come out in the consultation process, which is possibly why they're not there, though we're aware at times in these conversations you bring them forward. So thank you very much for that. But we can create a summary document, very happy to do that. And I can tell you that as part of the preparation of the strategy is that pages 16 and 17, we were going to print those as a single A4 piece of paper because we know that we could hand that out quite easily to the community. So thank you for your feedback, appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I won't hold this up, but it's because there's a sentence in there that refers to our current CE, and it's Louise put in there. She's hoping that it would bring more structure and consistency to the council's approach, and that's a really good strategy. That's a good outcome for us. When I was referring to the outside area outside the COP, I didn't mean to include tourism. I used that as an example of the benefit for us internally of leveraging off those other external organisations and the other parts of the Northland. That was what I was meant by that. But look, hey, I really support this stuff, and I'm looking forward to the final document when it comes back to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curnow.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to zoom in a little bit on the funding question, because currently council kind of does a bit of financial support through various grants and sort of, little places that funding can be slipped through. We don't do anything substantial, and we certainly don't have it as a line item in our budget. So I'm just wondering, is the funding that's talked about here in addition to that sort of ad hoc approach, or is it, so there probably needs to be an exercise to kind of bring that together and understand what the current support is, and is this additional to,
Through your worship, it is planned to be an addition.
Right.
But obviously we will work with the incoming council to show the whole picture. Funding for the community.
That'd be good, because it's pretty ad hoc at the moment.
Yep.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deliverables.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question is about the purpose, I guess, of a future investment, and we contrast we take a figure of $185,000 over 3 to 5 years, which is mentioned in the investment paper, and use that as a provocation to consider or explore the outcomes that we want, which is more arts, more culture, celebration of our heritage. And with all, so this is an exploratory question, Hinuera. How can we defend the application of that funding investment, which I would suggest will go towards such things as administration, use that word, rather than direct funding to the makers and the creatives for their kaiako, for their teachers or crafts people that can share the skills that they're seeking to develop, you know, whether it's carving or ceramics or poetry writing, the materials, which are such a prohibitive cost for the arts, they always have been, for many different disciplines. Event organisation, venue hire, venues that are open to challenging themes. And I speak from experience as the chair of the Creative Northland Grants Committee and knowing, so how can I provoke this by saying, couldn't we use this money to give more to those makers, to those creatives, and therefore get them doing that at their own inspiration, at their own creativity, rather than having an administrative, almost bureaucratic structure to make the arts happen.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcock. If I may be provocative back, is that Creative Northland currently, the way that the funding, for how we are funded, doesn't put Kaipara on the map. But if you want to have an inclusive arts, culture and heritage community, then we've got to put Kaipara on the map. Currently, how our funding comes to us is that we receive funding from Whangarei District Council for Whangarei District Council stuff, and we receive funding from Foundation North operational budget to be able to work within the Far North and the Kaipara districts. The money that we receive from Foundation North, we put towards our creative advisor to do 2 days per week here. And if that is administrative, that's administrative. But that administrative role means that our creative advisor is able to work with practitioners, determine what their needs are around some of the things you talk about. They may go to Creative Community Scheme and receive money for their project, but they also have the option then to walk across the road to Creative Northland and we can top them up. So we're not a grant provider, we provide financial assistance. We hire out equipment. We've got a huge amount of event equipment. We work, we're very used to Kumarani Circus coming to hire our equipment for us. We're used to Dargaville Matakoi Museum. We're used to our creative practitioners asking for a hand up, or a leg up, if you like, within the funding. So, and that's very important. We also know with our funders, especially with Foundation North, they ask us this on a regular basis. So when's Kaipara District Council going to start investing in the community outside of what Creative New Zealand provides? And I go, well, we're working on it, and hopefully the strategy will be able to provide that. So by investing in us means that then we can continue the work that we're doing to build the capability of your arts practitioners, because currently you don't have the resource or the capability to do that. Creative Northland does.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Hi, Jenny. Thank you very much for your presentation. This is an absolutely, this is great. I'm really excited. Been sitting here quietly listening to everyone's questions and comments, because I am extremely passionate about arts, culture and heritage strategy, and I have a lot of feedback. So I wanted to wait and see if anyone else.
Looking forward to that in writing, Councillor.
Most of it will come in writing, but I have feedback because I want to be able to ask you questions of you, provide that feedback. Yes. The first thing is the introduction to the document. There's a number of organisations and individuals named, and I'm just wondering what the criteria was for that, because I actually feel there's a lot of people left out. If I had an understanding of how that was put together, I could know.
The cultural landscape,
This is in the cultural landscape, yeah.
To respond to that, there is no narrative for the creative economy for Kaipara. So we had to, bring on somebody, Kyla McKenzie, who lives in the community, and we asked her to do research and to research what does the footprint look like for the Kaipara district, and go back as far as you can. Right. There is a lot, so she's had to go through history books, work through what is there, and then we've had to critique it and edit it to get it to where we need to be for this particular document. So this is only a slice, yeah? And there may be other organisations out there, but there is no footprint of what they may have been. So this is what we can find within our libraries, through the QE2 Council, going right back with them, talking to local people and what their knowledge base is. So this is not a complete. Normally we would have done a timeline, but I determined, and I will take full responsibility for this, is that perhaps a timeline wasn't what was required, but more of a story, of a narrative of where you've come from. And I would hope that when people read this, is that they will say, hey, we've been part of this narrative too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I'll probably provide some feedback in my email, based on what you've said and what I think, because I'm a bit concerned that people will feel left out. Oh, the Kaihu District Council.
Is there any particular group that you're thinking it's about?
I won't read them out because it won't be a full list. But I've got 7 that I came up with reading through. I'm like, well, that person is similar to that person. That organisation is the same as that organisation. So why have they not been mentioned?
Well,
I'll email that all through.
So just to be quite clear, just to be quite clear on the cultural landscape and the Māori creativity, those particular pages, they have been a work that has been done by Kyla McKenzie. We have commissioned that piece of work to do, and it's been based on her footprint, right? And based upon to what we know in the community.
Yeah.
So if we have felt that the community in the consultation had been able to given us that timeline, then we would have created the timeline. But the community didn't give us a timeline. Many of the community didn't know what the timeline was. You know, there were key things that were coming out through the museums, especially, but not actually around arts, visual arts.
Yeah.
Very little.
It's a challenge when you're building this from nothing.
So that's right. Yeah.
Understand that.
So you've got 7. I look forward to those names. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see if they qualify. I've a couple of goals. Really awesome. The action steps, the goal structure, very clear. Goal 5, now I need to look back to the document. Goal 5 talks about making events accessible, increasing access to events, which read to me, just want to be clear, this reads to me as about getting people in from maybe out of the urban centres, making events more accessible for people to travel to and get the publicity out better. I would actually really love to see accessibility as in wheelchair access and toilet facility and accessibility at the events, so that there are actually other parts of our community that can actually be involved and be present. For example, the Darwin Town Hall right now does not have an accessible toilet facility, which impacts all events currently being held there, as well as the Anzac Cinema. So that's just an example of, I mean, I know that has plans, but it's an example of what our differently abled community is dealing with.
So do you feel that that this document should talk about disability and access to better better spaces for our disability communities?
Yes.
So under cultural wellbeing, disability.
Yes. If we're talking about access to the arts, then we need to talk about access for all of our community.
Well, I'll review that and put it under access and participation for.
Is that under the heading of diversity, perhaps?
It could be. I wouldn't be surprised if when through the feedback from you and if you go out back to consultation, that we may end up with, and it has happened, we may end up with an extra objective, and it could be access and participation to our communities of disability. You know, so you know, what do they look like at the end of the day?
Sorry, so I'd just like to say right now that at this particular point, with 3/4 of an hour overtime on our scheduled agenda for today, I'd just like to say that I'd just like to say that I'm kind of disappointed.
I have one.
Because, sorry,
I have one.
no, please.
It's a question, not a statement or feedback.
No,
a legitimate.
Please, I'm just going to say, look, I'm really disappointed that we allowed half an hour for this item because it is substantial and you've got creative experts who are here as elected members around the table, who are writers, painters, theatre practitioners, museum experts, you know, it's, subject matter experts who are here as elected members, and the opportunity for them leaning in caringly. We're trying to shortchange by having this in half an hour. And so I'm just like going, from a process perspective, I'm just frustrated with today, because all of these points are really valid, because there are many points that the elected members are raising which need to be in a document before it goes out to the community. So just trying to, I'm just like going, so we need all of the feedback and the engagement, and half an hour is just not good enough. And I've just taken an extra 2 minutes of that. Councillor Wilson, back to you, but it's not a criticism of you, because I've got points that I need to make as well, because there are all sorts of aspects in this. So please.
My last question will be real quick. On goal 6, objective 12, we're talking about identifying programs, et cetera, for young people. Is there any reason that that goal couldn't include, because it talks about schools, but is there any reason it couldn't include organisations, community organisations that already run?
Yeah, no.
Just like that?
That's fine.
That was it, done, sweet, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just quickly for me on that same goal 6, my favourite phrase in the entire thing is around the creative futures for young Kaiparishans. So thank you for putting that in there. I think it's really important. I'll talk about the young Kaiparishans. The Kaiparalians are someone quite different, Councillor Vincent. But my key point is this. I go back to what Councillor Wills was talking about earlier regarding a strategy with measurable goals. And if you like, saying there will be 3 events, there will be 5 programs, there will be 7, within 10 years, there'll be 25 of X. There'll be pathways that so that council can say, community, here's not just set up this, create this, whatever, but actually like, did it get its mark? Did it make its mark? Are there measurable goals? Because if you can't measure it, if you like, you can't know whether you've got there or not. It just becomes a lovely thing. And this is a lovely thing, but how can we give it some strength so that when a future council is considering this for funding, that it says yes, because there are tangible, measurable goals that can be seen here, that, if you like, that the council can then, with the entire community, hold everyone to account about trying to reach those strategic goals. So how can there be measurable goals here against these actions? You know, you talk about who's responsible, what would be some measurable goals. So that's a large question, if you like, which you can't answer right now, but in consideration before it goes out to the public and before it comes back to council for final consideration.
Can I just ask a question back to you then? Triggers and partners are supposed to be a measurable outcome. So if we look at that goal 6, triggers and partners, collection of data on existing programs to feed into the strategy, or youth is seen as engaged with arts, culture and heritage. That is supposed to be a trigger, supposed to be measurable. I can change that column if you think that triggers and partners don't meet in your needs, and just create a new column that says measurable outcomes. I mean, we do have outcomes and strategies, but would that be of value?
So again, when you talk earlier about the ecology, the notion of the triggers and partners is a key aspect of that ecology. So I'd say that absolutely needs to remain in there. I'm just talking something different, and maybe it could just be for year 1 or year 1 and year 2, so that you say, here's a pathway to measurability here.
So we would, if the strategy is adopted in September, the first action then that Creative Northland takes is then to sit down with council officers to determine with council laws what their priorities are and what the measurable outcomes are, because we've got business plans that have to be created around that. But you would like to see more outcomes focused within the strategy rather than at that end of iteration.
Sorry, so I'm just like saying about measurability, how can you, and so I leave it to your talented team to get the what does that look like into this, but that notion of measurability here, so that there are tools that make it better for the officers working with the council going forward.
I could maybe make a suggestion. You've got an action for each of the first 3 years, and possibly just put a measured by. So what's the outcome of that action each year? So, I mean, you know, year one, hold an initial hui. Well, the hui is held. That's your measurable outcome.
Yeah.
So just sort of underneath at the bottom of each of those year one, year two, year three columns, just measured by, yeah, how will we know that we've done it?
Fair enough. That's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks, Anne. I appreciate that. Okay, well, just to say that, councillors, thank you for your feedback. And if you've got a lot of feedback, please send it back to us because, you know, by no means is this the final iteration of this document. Yeah, send it back to Jenny. And we'll just collect that information and we'll feed it back into this.
Yeah, get Phil to rewrite his forward and make it less negative.
Oh, right. Is it negative? What was that?
Oh.
Okay.
What's the timeframe, sorry?
Sorry, the timeframe for that feedback, please.
As soon as you can. I'm aware that your Jenny is going to be away very soon, and that if you want to go back out for consultation, we probably need the feedback back within the week, so that we can turn it in and then get it back out again for you guys just to review before it goes back out to consultation. And consultation process, I think, Jenny, Jason, is a week that you're going to be doing? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think we've got a clear pathway. Like I say, elected members are really passionate and interested in space. And thank you for this presentation today. Good luck with the consultation process that's coming ahead. And we look forward to seeing you in September. The expected adoption of this when it comes through following the public consultation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hinudawa, and congratulations to your team here.
Okay.
Olivia there, yeah.
It has been a journey, sure, but it's been a good one.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou.
Kia ora. See you.
Thank you. At this point, we will move on to our next item, which is the Kaihu Valley Trail Ahi Kiwi Bridge variation item, which we've been joined here by Mark Bell, who's been, as our Kaihu Valley Trail project manager, been patiently waiting here. So looking forward to the discussion here on Ahi Kiwi Bridge. So Mark Bell, kia ora.
Yes, greetings all.
Mark, would it be possible for you to turn on your camera?
The camera is not very functional at the moment, I'm sad to say.
Okay, all right, thank you.
There was a presentation. Is that something that comes up on your end? Here we go. Thank you.
Yes, there is a presentation we can see. Thank you. Gavin Dawson's driving the presentation. Thank you, Mark. Over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff. So on to that first slide. Thanks, Gavin.
Oh.
Let's talk about art.
So as I said, hopefully quite a brief presentation. And essentially what it is we have an existing contract for a suspension bridge as part of the Kaihu Valley Trail, which is this Ahi Kiwi Bridge. You can see a depicted picture there, or an artist's impression going across the Kaihu River there, around the Ahi Kiwi area. And we have a need to create a variation to this to procure another bridge. Next slide, thanks, Kevin. So essentially there's two key bridges that really form the main links and components for the Kaihu Valley Trail there. The one that I've just mentioned before that we've got a contract out for, the Kiwi Bridge, and the other one is the Porori Bridge, which is closer to Dargaville town, and you can see the depiction there going across the Kaihu River. Essentially that gives us a connection from the Dargaville town, from the station road across the river, and then on into that next section there in the Porori area. So originally the two bridges were tendered together, and we were in the middle of consultation at the particular time, and in our consultation, particularly with iwi, we came up with some real snags earlier on for their endorsement with this particular route from Dargaville town through to Porori there, and we had to remove it from the tender and only issue a tender for the Kiwi Bridge. So essentially what we're attempting to do at this stage, now that we've resolved those issues quite amicably, that this route is now a go, and we'd really like to be able to add it in again as a variation to that existing contract. Next slide. Thanks, Kevin. And so just recapping very briefly, we've got this one logged in for the council meeting at the end of the month, and we would like to present that there for approval for this variation to add this one into that existing contract. As I said, very brief. Next slide. Any questions and comments?
Thank you, Mark. First question from Councillor Curnow.
Yes, thank you, Mark. On page 48 of our agenda under financial implications, which is in the report, you talk about the Porori Bridge, including contingency, is 498,000, and 537 of this has been awarded already for Kiwi Bridge. So I'm just wondering, the Kiwi, that value includes contingency, does it?
Yes, it does. Yes,
okay,
it does.
good. So both those, the 498 and the 537, both include contingency. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mark, just following on from Councillor Curnow on that financial implication. So basically, this was originally in the plan, and it had been financially, or the funding for it had been already put in place. But then when it was tendered, it was withdrawn, and you're now putting it back again. So in terms of the funding for it, there's no change to what was originally envisaged. Is that right?
Also correct.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Mr Mayor, I got my hand up.
Sorry, I can't see that, Councillor Wills. So Councillor Wills, over to you. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just my question is, please correct me, is Kiwi Bridge is being funded separately from the KBT fund, PGF fund, is that correct?
We got some additional funding from NZTA or from Waka Kotahi for 350,000, some additional funding specifically allocated towards the Kiwi Bridge, yes.
Oh, sorry, I thought, beg your pardon, I thought we had, it was either $600,000 or $800,000 had been given by Waka Kotahi for bridge work. Is that not correct?
Technically, it's 350,000 specifically for the Kiwi Bridge, and an additional 250,000 for mitigating any State Highway 12 crossings, of which there are in the area further north, or between these two bridges anyway.
So just my last question, I appreciate this, is just for my understanding, because the money is coming from a different pot as opposed to the KVT, is there, you've said here it's relatively that they can be combined for administrative purposes. there's no issue with an overrun on either bridge impacting on the funding on the other, considering they're coming from two different sources?
No issues. This has been discussed with Waka Kotahi, and I have reported on this with MB, also indicating that we do have this additional 350,000 for the Kiwi Bridge. So no issues that I'm aware of whatsoever.
And sorry, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there further questions, elected members? Yeah. No further questions. It seems quite straightforward. Thank you, Mark. And so this will be coming through to the August council meeting?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we look forward to council addressing this matter then, and opportunity for statements and speeches at that time. All right, thank you. Thanks, Mark, for today, and thanks for the presentation now. At this point, we're going to adjourn and take our second 5-minute refreshment break. And so we'll resume again, please, at 10 minutes to 12 for the Three Waters Reform Funding Package item number 4. Thank you. Ka kite. our General Manager for Infrastructure Services at Kaipara, here in the room presenting this item to us. So, Anan, morning. Morena.
Your worship, and thank you, elected members. I thought I'd just take the opportunity to take you through the various funding packages that the Department of Internal Affairs have been releasing and are about to release. Take the paper as read, but I thought just do a short presentation and take you through the various tranches. So, purpose is just to bring up to speed in terms of the various packages that have been released for council. Give an overview of the funding packages and then next steps in terms of the directions we're seeking. In terms of the funding packages, they're made up of a number of tranches. The first one was released in July 2020. It was associated with the stimulus funding. 761,000 was available in total, and Kaipara District Council received 4.69 million, and that was used for renewals of water and wastewater throughout the regions in Kaiwaka, Mangatoroto, Ruawai, and Dargaville. And then since July, they've been releasing various other packages to support the reform program. There are three packages associated with the recent release. There's a Better Off funding package, and that's $2 billion in total, and Kaipara has received 16.14 million. There's a transition support funding, it's $44 million in total, and Kaipara is to receive 422,000. Then there's the No Worse Off funding, and further information is still being developed by the Department of Internal Affairs and will be released. Just in terms of the Better Off funding, the 416 is brought to council over a period of time, and there's a further report to come back in terms of the two libraries that we are looking to, or community hubs, and Jason or Mr. Maris will answer further questions in relation to that. There is also a piece of work that the Department of Internal Affairs, as you heard this morning, Marlon Bridge talking about, where they're looking at debt transfer or relieving debt, Three Waters debt of councils. And that's a piece of work that's currently underway with the department, and further information will be released. So what we are seeking today is continued discussions with Crown infrastructure partners in terms of the No Worse Off funding, or Better Off funding, sorry, and continue finalising the agreement associated with the transition funding. We'll bring back an application for the two libraries or community hubs in Dargaville and Mangawhai at the end of the month, and similarly bring back a report on what activities we see covered by the transition funding, and seek approval for the Chief Executive to execute that agreement.
Thank you, Councillor Deliverables Woodcock.
I just have one initial question, Anin, just to pick up on your brief trajectory of the funding starting July 2020 in the 4 million. I would also like to note, or you omitted to mention, the October 2020 $11 million funding that was pegged to signing a memorandum of understanding to enter the reform process. Yes?
I wasn't aware of that package of funding.
So it was. All of the councils of the country were invited to accept various amounts of funding upon entering to an MOU to enter the reform process, and the DIA presented that as being an opt-out at any time, i.e. if we took that $11 million, which we did, and we've been using it for our Three Waters upgrades.
Got a question?
My question is, how are we to have faith in the DIA when the minister about faced on that MOU, which was meant to be a voluntary process? How do we know and how can you give us position to trust that the debt better off, no worse off packages will be met if we proceed with the transition period?
I don't think we can ask of.
Through you, Worship, we can't answer that question, I'm afraid. We can't give you an idea of your level of trust with DIA.
Okay. Can you find out from the people who advise you, who must be the DIA?
Well, I mean, Marlin Bridge has offered to come back and have a specific dialogue on that, and I think that's the appropriate time to canvass that directly with them.
Excellent, thank you.
And then sorry, we haven't got the slides on the screen, but with regard to the sources of the funds that have been put here, some of these funds, for example, the Better Off funding, is coming from the water entities. It's being sourced from the water entity.
Yes.
It's so with the different funding packages you have here, are they all coming through the water entity, or are they coming from different sources? Where ultimately, what source of funds leads to each of those?
Yeah, Your Worship, my understanding is that the government have a pool of funds available for Three Waters reform, and the debt will be put onto the new entity. So,
sorry, the debt story, that's fine. So if we go back to your slide where you say, here's the better off,
yep,
and here's the no worse off, and here's what's already happened, that 4.69 million, yeah? So what I'm talking to is what sources of funds feed into that $200 million amount, or this $1 billion amount, this $4 billion amount, those offerings. I'm trying to get the clarity here so that all the Kaipara people know the difference between the taxpayer paid funds and what the entities are going to be paying, because the Better Off funding is paid by the entity. So that's a significant cross-subsidisation for the proposed community hubs that we're talking about. Yeah, so it's where I'm going. It's like I'm going back to that slide, and I'm going, can we have more detail in that space, please, about where the monies are coming from? Who's paying for this?
Are you ratepayer or taxpayer?
Correct, all the water entities. Sue Davidson over there. Thank you, flag flying.
50% is coming from central government and 50% is to be funded from the proposed water services.
So that's for which? That's the Better Off package. Okay, thank you.
Yep, so through Your Worship, my understanding is that all of the funds will be available through either local central government or the water services entity, but the bundle of all the packages will be put on as a debt to the water services entity.
Yes, and that's another whole mess. Yeah, but I'm just trying to get that clear information. Thank you. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. One is, in your presentation, you said that council had received 16.4 million in the Better Off package, and I thought more accurate to say that it's been allocated.
Yep, isn't it?
Okay, cool. Well, on that. The other thing was, I thought in our discussions about the use to which the Better Off package might be put, yes, there was agreement about the two libraries, Dargle, Mangawhai, but I thought also there was a third option, which was like as a backup, should there be sufficient funding, which might be a bit of a pipe dream, to refer to a footpath which or walkway going up Gorge Road in Mangatoroto. And I was wondering if it might be possible to not lose sight of that and still keep it in there as
Through you, Your Worship, so if I can hear that, the April briefing gave us direction to look at, to have further discussions with iwi, and with our Crown infrastructure partners via the DIA, our relationship manager, on the two community hubs, so one in Dargaville, one in Mangawhai. The investigative work, we've been working on that since that April briefing. I would have to say that there was not going to be any funds outstanding from those two projects.
I realise the way that it's going, very possibly we'll scrape by with getting one of them built, but I just thought, well, we'll just include it there as a backup.
Yeah, and if you recall from the briefing, the logic behind your direction was largely because it provides an asset for the community in longevity, but also the fact that there has been consultation with the community about both of those projects. And so you've consulted with the community on the libraries in the LTP, you're included in the LTP, so you're on safe ground there. Just to remind everybody.
Actually in the LTP, that's fair enough. But I thought that this walkway had been the subject of, it's been put in front of council previously as well.
Thank you. Councillor Deliverables Cook.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Mr Barris, that's a bit of a stretch to say there's been consultation about the libraries with the community and tag that to the discussion that we're having now, because the long-term plan consultation about the need for a new library in Dargaville and a new one in Mangawhai was not linked to forfeiting the community's assets in order to get those libraries. So please, can we make sure that when you use the word consultation about libraries has been done, that's actually a little bit, that's misleading, because this is a consultation. I would like to ask, when has a consultation been done about whether the community would like to spend $16.14 million of the so-called better off package onto libraries? Because the May briefing and the survey that was presented at our last meeting here in Mangawhai in June, was it in June? There was 96% of respondents from that survey said do not accept the bribe, the $16 million. So when is the community, excuse me, Councillor Kuhn, I'm allowed to ask questions. When is the community, apart from iwi, who you're saying you're consulting, everybody in the community going to get consulted on accepting these funds?
Through you, Your Worship, so I just want to clarify one point. The two facilities, the library / community hub in Dargaville and Mangawhai, was consulted with the community on as part of the last LTP process.
Yes,
We allocated funding to those two projects and we'll be utilising that funding as well. The 16.14 million.
Yes.
The council gave us direction at the April briefing to put towards and further the work for those two projects we're continuing with. The council, we've been putting a report to the August council meeting at this stage, hopefully, seeking your approval, to use the $16.1 million on this.
Okay, I hear you, Mr Maris. Thank you very much. That gives me some comfort. But we are 9 members. When is the community going to be formally asked in this whole Three Waters process what they want, what they think about whether we should accept the $16 million for 2 libraries or not?
For you, I'm going to refer you back to the April briefing when the direction that council gave us.
That's this council, the full community.
No, just bear with me. At the April briefing, the direction from this council was to further these 2 projects for this funding based on the fact that they were included in the LTP. So we are enacting that direction.
But so, you know, at the May briefing, I asked our chief executive, could we please do a consultation with our community? Are you saying that there is not going to be one?
We've already done one.
So the challenge, Councillor Deliverables, is that the consultation regarding those library and/or community hubs has been done.
Yes.
As with many other aspects that are in long-term plans and annual plans, those consultations are done, and then funding sources may come along which change where the funding source is, but nevertheless, the vision for what council would be wanting to do regarding the expenditure from whatever source is embodied in that long-term plan vision. So that's consulted on absolutely clearly.
You don't need to repeat.
So,
I'm not silly.
no, because the important matter here is that there is no consultation framework for the Three Waters reforms with the framework that the government has put forward here for us to be working with. And because of the timeframes that we have, and because of the fact that these items are already consulted upon, then it's sufficient planning to occur in this direction. Now it's an entirely different moot point about whether it should be taken up or not. Okay, but the important, and that's a decision for council for later, and that's coming to us, yet to come to us. But the important matter here is that the government has allocated funds to us, and there is a process here for us to walk through how best to utilise those funds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So just to recap, I've had Mr. Maris, Councillor Kuno, and now our Mayor tell me three different people tell me different ways that in the long-term plan consultation, the community or those that responded agreed to there being a need for 2 new libraries. And I repeat that, of course, that happened. We know that happened. The consultation for the long-term plan happened as it should have happened. And I leave my statement with, there at no stage has been any consultation with the Kaipara community across the community about the Three Waters, about whether or not they take any form of funding in compensation for the forfeiture or the theft of their community-owned assets. And that is what I would like to see happen, is a formal consultation with our community, not just around the council table.
Thank you.
And I ask for you as the Mayor to lead that, please.
Thank you. So look, I'm just going to come back to you with a counter statement, which is there is nothing in anything that the government has said that this is in any way compensation for forfeiture of the assets. All right, they have explicitly said this is not compensation. There is no compensation package here. So it's very, very challenged piece of territory that we're in here, Councillor Deliverables Woodcock, but absolutely the government does not say this is compensation. There is no compensation. So I think on this point, Councillor Deliverables Woodcock, I think we just need to move on and back into the rest of the discussion here. Your point is very clearly heard, all right, but there is no compensation for what is proposed. Okay, there is no compensation, and that's, if you look to our neighbours in Whangarei who have assets rather than debts, which are going to be part of their Three Waters change, they're absolutely anxious about compensation, and there is no compensation at all. So in this presentation today, it's interesting because there is yet more information to come, especially regarding the statement of the debts of Kaipara District Council, because, and Sue Davidson, I might bring you in here. So again, on that key one slide in the middle of that presentation, there was a statement here about the debts of the council and relating to water assets will disappear along with the assets. And so again, it will be important at some point very soon to be expressing to the Kaipara community again what that revised financial position of Kaipara District Council would look like without the Three Waters debt. And so, because I'm believing we would have fewer than less than $5 million of debt as a council after that transfer, but.
Through the Mayor, so what we're doing is with our annual report, that's when we'll finalise, it'll be audited, all the debt that we've got. And what we're doing this year is proposing to put a note to the accounts under loans with all the detail of the internal loans. So you actually understand what the internal loans are, they've all been reconciled. And so there's a total there, so you can see clearly what's the internal and what we have actually borrowed, which obviously I think there may not be any debt left, or maybe up to 5 million, that might be all, yeah, because most of it is has been funded. Well, there's been an amount that's been funded by some of the funds that have come in, basically. So we've got 44, I think about 44 million external debt, but the reality is that if we had borrowed what we said we had borrowed externally, it would have been more likely 51 million, 55 million, something like that.
Thank you.
It'll come through in the annual report.
Thank you. And so if you like, the overall, when we're talking about here's the government financial aspects of the Three Waters reforms, we have yet more information still to add to make the one-page document that says, well, this is Kaipara's financial situation here. Today's presentation is a building block for that, but we don't yet have quite the complete picture yet. That's fair, yeah? Yep. Yeah, but it's going to be transformative, extraordinarily transformative for the Kaipara Council. Yeah.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, can I please ask you to refrain from making personal, opinionated statements about this reform that are misleading because other people have other opinions about it.
It's not misleading.
Thank you.
It will transform it, whether you like it or not. It is transformative.
It would be
transformative, and that means what?
It doesn't have to be a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a massive transformation for Kaipara, and that we will end up with no debt, which is a huge thing.
We will end up with no control of our water. The ownership of water, the ownership of life.
Councillor Navarro Woodcock, I'd just like you to please take a breath for a moment. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Because and I'll stand beside my comment here around the use of the word transformative, that these proposals of the government would be transformative for Kaipara District Council. And that I think no one would be under any doubt about that.
This is a transformative experience.
That's indeed. It's very, very, very profound. Thank you. Sue, you're still standing to control. No. Hiding behind Dylan now. And Councillor Wethy, thank you, and Councillor Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and obviously since about the last 5 years, Council has been actually providing for depreciation of its assets, and the bulk of those, of course, are in the water area, a lot of them in the water area. Now, we included, if you remember, you entered our Council submission to the Select Committee to try and clarify the situation with respect to when it comes to debt transfer, what was the government or the DIA's position on the depreciated reserves that we're holding on our account. Have we had anything in since we put that submission in to suggest that they are firming up any position on the depreciation? Because this might apply to a lot of councils around the country.
Correct. Yeah. No, we haven't had any feedback from them. I suspect it'll be coming in the coming weeks when they start to work through the thousands of submissions that they have received. We've actually noted that we want to be heard on that matter.
Yeah.
Or the entire bill process that we put through. But I also think it's an opportunity to put that forward to Marlon Bridge when he comes and addresses the council.
Thank you, Sue Davidson.
So just through the Mayor, what we're looking at doing this financial year is having all the depreciation accounts reconciled, so we know whether we're actually owed money, or whether, and whether we have to rate more the following year, or whether, we're actually in funds, and whether we want to spend that money on different things before, within the next couple of years.
Excuse me, can you clarify what you mean by with the depreciation, whether we are owed money by whom?
By the ratepayers. So what's been happening is that we've only been accumulating and paying for depreciation. We show depreciation at 100%, but we've only been claiming it, rating for it at a slow rate for the next. In fact, the Mangawhai wastewater scheme isn't fully rated, I think, until 2026 from memory. And we pay for renewals out of our depreciation. But we've gone back on our records to get really clear reconciliations to the 30th of June, so that we have a good understanding of what the balances are, whether we've used too much for renewals when there hasn't been enough depreciation, or whether we've actually collected more rates in depreciation than renewals. And that's what we're working on. So we'll have those figures as well.
And that reconciliation will take into account that really your depreciation is really only over maintenance. Anything that we put into that wastewater plant to allow for growth is actually should not be funded out of depreciation.
No, it won't be. It's not.
That's been very clear. Okay.
And is it possible when you, for this month's report for these funding items, that you can set out exactly what the general rate burden is per rating unit for meeting the interest of our future obligations and our current public debt? So we know what, in terms of our rates bills.
Yes.
How much of that rates bill is apportioned towards debt financing and depreciation or future liabilities? You don't have to answer that now, but that would be great to see that in a report before us with actual figures of, so how much would the average Kaihu ratepayer be able to see that by forfeiting these assets and getting rid of this debt, they would be better off on their ratings, on their rates notice? Can you not do that?
Well, I can do that, but I don't know if that answers the question, because we don't know how much the new entity is going to charge. So how much better off they will be or won't be. Until I think,
why are we even having this conversation?
So just on that point, thank you, Sue, because the new water entities are enshrined with the same rating powers in the legislation to rate the people. So they could come back to the people of Mangawhai and say, here is your Mangawhai wastewater targeted rate. And here
they have taken on.
Yes, for the debt that they have taken on. And they could say, well, here's your Mangawhai targeted rate. And we see the plans that Kaipara District Council's done. They've been managing that admirably, and that they may say, well, all of Auckland will pay for Auckland's projects and all of everyone else. They may say that.
It's not in the water entities bill.
But
that is coming in the economic regulator.
Correct.
So it's not actually.
Sorry, it's not defined yet, but the intention for the water entities to have rating powers is clear.
Mr. Mayor.
So we can't yet see, if you like, the answers to your questions, which are very good question, Councillor Deliverables Woodcock, is absolutely unknowable. It's not that it's just not known, it's unknowable yet, because as Councillor Curnow says, the second of the three waters bills hasn't even been introduced yet, so we have no sight of that, about how the water entities are going to work, how they're going to be able to charge people or not, whether, what kind of instruments and tools they'll be using. It's just utterly unknowable right now for us. So the staff can't answer these questions.
So exactly my point, that this whole conversation is merely conjecture and it's actually not productive, I feel. And And more productive would be how with our governance team and our wonderful infrastructure team, how can we ask our community what they want? Because there's people, I'm seeing these people in this room here, and all of the people, the hundreds of emails and everybody, they're telling us to fight this.
This is not an idea.
Not to merely mutely go along with this lovely transition process and accept this money for that and that money for that, when actually we're having one conversation about, oh, our debt will vanish, we'll have nearly $5 million. And on the other hand, our mayor's pointed out quite accurately that the new entities can then lay us down with a whole lot more debt, which is also including Auckland's debt for their failed stormwater. And so it's all conjecture, and therefore, really, I prefer not to sit here, because actually our action should be on supporting the democratic process, which is the second reading of the Water Services Entities Bill, which has 4.5 months of hearing of the New Zealand people before the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee. And we should be asking that committee to come to Kaipara, along with Mr. Marlin Bridge, to hear the views of Kaipara people, and not just merely us around the table and officers.
Thank you. And so the Select Committee has indicated that it will be travelling around the country. So, Councillor Wilson-Collins, back to the agenda, please, and Councillor Wills after that. Thank you. Back to the matter at hand. No?
I had a counter question.
Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to move our message.
Just hold it in then.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wills.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm just waiting for all the grandstanding to finish, and now I'll continue with the questions regarding the actual matter at hand. Reassurance. Sorry, my question is regarding the discussions we've had at the council level on the utilisation of that $12 million better off funding to direct the funds towards the
$16 million, Mr. Wills.
To deal with directing the funding at the community buildings / libraries at Mangawhai and Darwell. I'm becoming confused about where we've got to. So this question is probably for the governance team. The last time this matter was discussed and the funds were allocated and agreed to by council, was there a vote taken at that, or was it a briefing? So it just became a discussion, please.
Your Worship, so that was the April council briefing, Councillor Wills. So you gave us, so we introduced, Sue actually wrote the report and introduced the funding package was announced, and there were a number of options provided at that briefing. The direction provided at that briefing was for the staff to head away and investigate further the community hubs for both Dargaville and Mangawhai. It was to liaise with our iwi around that, because that is a requirement of the process that's been set. And then also continue liaising with our DIA relationship manager to further the actual application itself without submitting it. The direction you gave was for us to do all that and then come back to you and council for a decision on allocating those two projects for that funding. Now the intention is we're doing all that work at the moment. It's taken a while to get through it all. But we are intending to bring a decision through to the council at the August meeting.
So at this stage, the council at that briefing supported this progress and this focus on those two assets as being the way we were to utilise those funds.
That's the direction that this council provided to us.
Thank you. I'm just wanting reassurance that we're actually on track with what we agreed as a council to progress this, which has now been put into this briefing paper. So there was no vote by the council to do anything other than pursue this is the way as our preferred option, tying it with the LTP aspirations. That's correct?
Correct, for your Worship. So we are just waiting a little bit more for our iwi perspective. It takes some time to go through their governance as well. So we're going through their governance currently. I'm hoping to hear from them in the next week or two. And then if I do that, then the intention is to bring a paper to the council meeting for a decision in this month, at the end of August, to apply that funding to these two projects.
Thank you. And one last question, please, for my understanding is, and it might be for Sue Davison, my understanding is that if we choose not to spend this, I think it was 12 or $16 million within 5 years, then we lose it. Is that correct?
I think we have to apply for the first 4 million tranche by September, and we have to utilise that by June 2027. That's my understanding.
Yeah. So to use it or lose it scenario, that's what we're being presented as a council.
That is correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Curnow.
I haven't gone through the draft agreement on this in any detail, but I'm just wondering if there's a commitment from the government that if you get money from the first tranche and you fulfil all the obligations in terms of those contracts, that you're guaranteed to get the rest of it right. So our first tranche should be around the design, scoping.
Yeah.
And then the second tranche is about the building.
Yeah, through you, Worship. So what we've done post the April briefing is stood up a project team to work this through, and we have been engaging with our relationship manager with the DIA, and so the first tranche is key. We're taking, after your direction, we're taking the project as a whole of life for both tranche funding, but we've targeted it so that tranche one covers off the design, the consenting, the all of that sort of stuff to get the foundation ready. If tranche two did not eventuate for whatever reason, then we still have done that work and we've got a project ready to go for other funding.
And then we could look at sort of ratepayer funding or.
Yeah. So for clarity, for both buildings, both spaces.
And so sorry, just to finish with my question, but thank you, Anna. But we also had it confirmed quite clearly from the government that despite going down this path with the funding, individual councillors and the council as a whole have the right to still voice opposition to the Three Waters process. So that can be run that
not the council as a whole.
And that can be run in tandem with us progressing down this application process.
For you, Worship. So the Minister for Local Government, Nanaia Mahuta, has herself come out and said that utilising the allocated money for the Better Off funding package does not preclude the council from opposing the reforms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's in the agreement that you cannot make statements that will bring the DIA into disrepute.
It's not.
There's been through your worship, there's been a media release and a lot of information post that funding agreement where it's been clarified that it is perfectly okay.
Okay. My question is is it correct that if we put forward a funding proposal, such as 2 libraries, and we are granted the first tranche, 4 million of that, then we could foreseeably enter into a contractual agreement to construct these 2 new buildings. And should it happen that with all this conjecture of Three Waters reform going ahead, should it happen that it should not go ahead because there's a change of government and they rescind all of the reform process that has been enacted to date, that our council would be left with the debt liability?
No. For your worship, so no, because through the process that we're running to prepare the proposal, it kind of links to my previous point, the tranche 1 funding, where we're making sure that there's design, scope, all that, all that sort of stuff included in it so that the project is ready to go. There won't be an awarding of contracts or anything along those sort of lines in that tranche 1 fund.
But so I read on the Three Waters DIA that the Better Off $16.14 million is paid in arrears.
Yes, it is. However, there is in the funding agreement, you're entitled to draw down in advance for, I think it's 10% of the funding. So you're entitled to do that straight away.
Yes, but
once the proposal is approved by the Crown Infrastructure Partners, we could draw down that initial funding
10%
to use to try and avoid the problem that you would.
And I think it's also worth noting that the tranches are secured by a contract with Crown Infrastructure Partners. So it's not like it's some kind of vague promise. You have a legal contract for the tranche 1 money, and then when you're ready, assuming tranche 2 went ahead, then you would have a legal agreement confirming tranche 2. Whether it's, in whatever sort of payments get made out of that, the commitment is there, and it's a legal commitment secured by a contract. So, so I think that I commend the staff for looking at this project in terms of ways of blocking it so that we can be secure that the design work is done and delivered, secured by that contract, and then the implementation, assuming that we get to that stage, can then be covered by a new funding agreement under tranche 2. So I commend you for the approach that you're taking.
That would be useful information, Councillor Kerno, to have in our report that the $16 million Better Off package is Impervious to political change.
Tranche 1 is.
Yes.
If we sign up to it. Tranche 2 may be more vulnerable, but.
Okay.
What we're doing in tranche 1 is getting to the stage where we've got all the design work, all the consenting, all the scoping work done, ready to go to contracting, but not going there until tranche 2 is confirmed and we can get a signed contract on tranche 2.
That's secure. That makes sure there's no risk to council.
So no risk to the council in that. Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification about the funding that's on the table right now? No further questions. Thank you. Look, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Mr. Maris. Thank you, Sue, for your input there. There's still a lot of water to go under the bridge on this. I thank you, Councillor Wills, for listening. A lot of water to go under the bridge on this, and we're still a long way to go, but there's a whole lot of new information that's just come there today. Thank you. At this point in our day, we are now at the end of the public open part of today's council briefing. So we're now going to take a short break. We've now picked up on time, which is good. So we'll resume, please, at 12:45. Thank you, with our public excluded workshop. Thank you. So thank you to the members of the public for coming along and hearing what you've heard. As you can hear, it's a complex time for us all. Ka kite. 10 minutes.
10-minute lunch break.
That's